Welcome to the home of Terrebonne Chamber of Commerce's State Representative District 51 Forum. I am Chad Abear, owner of SafeWorks Safety Solutions, Chair of the Chamber's Board of Directors, and tonight's moderator. The purpose of this forum is to help our members in the community become better informed voters so they can make the best decisions this coming election. The Chamber is dedicated and committed to promoting, educating, and advocating for business prosperity and regional economic growth. Our mission is uniting community and building a stronger Terrebonne. The Chamber has taken every precaution to ensure that no one candidate was shown any favoritism or endorsement. Questions were submitted by Chamber members and the general public. All questions were secured by our Chamber CEO, Ms. Nicole Blanchard, along with our Executive Vice Chair of our Government Activities Division, Mr. Bill Erosh. No candidate, Chamber member, board member, member of the general public, nor myself have had any access to the questions prior to tonight's forum. I'd like to introduce our guest panelists tonight, Ms. Monique Crochet with Nicholls State University, Dr. Christine Strickland with Fletcher Technical Community College, Mr. Bill Erosh with Watkins Walker Erosh Hoychik, attorneys at law. Thank you for volunteering your time tonight. Now I'd like to introduce our candidates. To the audience's far left, Mr. Clayton Voisin. Seated next to me, Ms. Beryl Amadei. Candidates, I will give you each 2 minutes following the introduction to introduce yourself prior to the questions. Thank you for being here tonight. I'd like to go over the ground rules for the candidates in the forum. Each candidate, prior to being seated, pulled a number to determine who would go first in answering the questions in the seating order. Each candidate will be given the same question and will have 3 minutes to answer each question asked by the panelist. I will give each candidate, or Mr. Erosh will give each candidate a signal by holding up a card when he or she has 30 seconds left on the timer to finish answering the question. When the 3 minutes are up, I will notify the candidate that his or her time is up and move on to the next candidate or the next question. I'm asking each candidate to please respect their opponent and allow them to answer the questions without interruption within their 3 minutes. Should you want to rebut or discuss a answer given by a previous candidate, you should do so within your 3 minutes of your allotted time of your next question. Any candidate who does not follow the rules will be given 2 warnings. The third violation will result in the candidate being asked to leave the forum. At the end of the forum, each candidate will have time for closing comments. Do y'all have any questions? Ground rules for the viewing audience. No verbal outbursts or heckling or disrespecting any candidate. No questions will be taken from the audience, and no warning will be given if an audience member violates any of the ground rules. He or she will be asked to leave the forum. Mr. Voisin, would you please take 2 minutes to introduce yourself to the general public?
Thank you, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Clayton Voisin, candidate for State Representative District 51. I would like to take this time to thank the Chamber of Commerce, Fletcher College, and also HTV for putting this on. I've served 12 years on the Terrebonne Parish Council as a leader of my community, and have worked with 3 different parish presidents and councils. That experience prepared me to serve District 51 for the next 4 years. Our entire region will need to have some changes to be able to move forward. I have served 8 of my 12 years as either the council chairman or the vice chairman, of which are elected by the other council members. It is the most served by any other councilman in the history of Terrebonne Parish, the 8 years. That being an honor is second only to the fact that all of my years of service was as a team player in a leadership role. Myself, my wife Veronica, our 5 children, and 10 grandchildren have or will graduate from public school system, which we have complete confidence in. My promise to you tonight is that I will never vote against funding for public education. I will never vote against money for Nicholls State University or for Fletcher Community College. I promise to support and keep open Chabert Medical Center and Tesh Medical in Morgan City. I have worked all my life in the shrimp, oil field, and insurance finance business, then in business for myself, such as in retail, sales, and entertainment, then on to public service.
Mr. Voisin, your 2 minutes for introduction are up. Ms. Amadei, would you take 2 minutes to introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, sir. I'd like to thank the hosts and sponsors tonight, Dr. Strickland and Fletcher, the Chamber, and HTV for hosting this, giving us this opportunity. My name is Beryl Amadei, and I am the House of Representatives member for District 51. I've served for one term so far, and I would like to continue to serve. I feel that this position, this job, is one way to serve the public and to do it very efficiently and effectively in the number of hours that I would have in any given week for public service. This position allows me to serve the greatest number of people possible with all the decisions that we make and the budget that we have to work on, and in solving problems for people when they contact us with whatever their needs are. Sometimes it's a matter that a legislator can do. Sometimes it's a matter of simply directing a person to the right agency or entity within the government that is responsible and has the authority to help them with whatever the issue is. Before I came to this position, I had served on the Terrebonne Parish Council. I had served as council chair. Before that, I had served on the Zoning and Planning Commission. And so I came in to public service positions already working with government entities to try and find solutions to the problems that people face every day. The training on zoning and planning helped me to understand the parish ordinances and building codes. It helped me get ready for the council. Training on the council, experience on the council helped me to be ready for this job that I'm doing now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Amadei. We'll begin with our first question. Ms. Crochet, would you please direct the first question to Mr. Voisin?
Sure. Good evening. Mr. Voisin, this question. What do you think should be the first priority of the state legislator when the state session begins? And secondly, what actions will you take to see that work on that priority is initiated as quickly as possible?
I would like to start my time with just finishing up what I hadn't completed.
Please feel free to do so.
Just briefly, very diversified background, which is what I tried to prove to you people just a minute ago, which has helped me to understand about the needs of the people I've served and want to continue serving. And I've worked as a public servant. Is what I've enjoyed most, being able to help people when they're most needy. I humbly ask for your vote and support, and please help me to help you. Now to move on to your question, first priorities. I think my first priority would be when I first get there, I think I will need to issue apologies to the House of Representatives, to the Senate, and to the governing administration for any obstructions that may have come in the past 4 years, from obstructionists possibly that has worked in Baton Rouge on the behalf of people from Terrebonne and from other parishes. Then begin to lead a campaign to hopefully free up some dollars which has been denied to us for education, flood protection, economic development, and infrastructure throughout the region, which is something that we so greatly need. This region has suffered tremendously. District 51 is a diverse district. It starts in Dulac, Louisiana, runs all the way to Labadeville, Louisiana, and across to Morgan City. And I think that's, well, it's going west, but it's still in Louisiana. But all of that area, that entire area is in District 51, a broad area, very diversified, very hard to represent, and we plan to do that, though, with the diversification that I have had in the past with my education and training. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mrs. Voisin.
Thank you. Ms. Amadei, would you like me to repeat the question?
Sure.
Sure. What do you think should be the first priority of the state legislator when the next session begins? And secondly, what actions will you take to see that work on that priority is initiated as quickly as possible?
Thank you. I believe the first priority is one of the most major issues that we've been dealing with for these past 4 years, which is the state budget. I would propose that budget reform is a very great need, and some of the things that I've already been working on and I'm prepared to come in with next session would be ideas for how we do the budget. For example, the budget grows every year automatically. It has some built-in increases. But even in spite of that, I believe that the budget growth needs to be limited so that it does not outpace the growth of the state economy. Right now, when the state budget grows faster than the state economy, we can't sustain that. And so budget reform is a top priority. There are a number of things that need to be reformed within the budget. The capital outlay budget is one. We have improved it some in the last 4 years, but we have a long way to go, because right now the capital outlay bill contains $4.1 billion in projects, but this year, in this fiscal year, we're probably only going to spend about $387 million maximum. So we need to change the way that we do the capital outlay bill. We have, for the foreseeable future, the Department of Health's budget is going to grow by $550 million every year. That's $500 million automatically. And we will have to find a way to be able to fund that, because I'm not willing to come back to the taxpayers every year looking for another $500 million out of everyone's pockets. So we must restructure the way that we do the budget so that it can be more efficient and effective to fund the things that are necessary.
Thank you, Ms. Amadei. Next question.
Good evening, candidates. This next question will start with Ms. Amadei. What are your top 3 infrastructure projects for the Terrebonne region?
Thank you. The top 3 are actually projects that are currently moving forward. We need to see that they keep moving forward. One of them would be to complete the work we're doing, the Morganza to the Gulf project. With Hurricane Barry, that was a really good test of our system, and it's working. And we can now bring the message, it's working, with us to Washington to hopefully encourage the federal government to send down some funding, which they've never done yet. So the work that we are needing to finish are the 2 weak spots, the spots where the work is currently underway, but the levees weren't quite as high as the standard we're aiming for, and that's why they were overtopped with the big storm surge. So at Pointe-aux-Chenes and at Dularge, where the levees were overtopped, that's very important. Protecting people, their homes, their properties. Next, the Bayou Lafourche Freshwater District has projects. I think it was just yesterday they signed an agreement, a cooperative endeavor agreement. The DEQ and CPRA are joining with the district. They're going to be funding a $65 million pump station at Donaldsonville. And also, there will be a water control structure near the Highway 1010 bridge. And these projects affect our drinking water in this region. So our safety, and then our health, drinking water is very important. And third, we have been able to pass a bill this last session that's going to provide some funding to get the raising of LA1 underway on the way to Port Fourchon. For every day that area of roadway is underwater, we lose $22 million an hour. So this is very important for our economy here. Even though it's not directly in our area right here, it does affect our region. So those are the first 3 that I can think of.
Thank you. Mr. Voisin, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, ma'am, that's fine. Top 3, I would think, ma'am, would be we're in dire need of highway infrastructure in District 51, and certainly in this entire region, because of the fact that we're all field related. We have heavy trucks constantly on our highways. This soft soil that we live on is not ideal for that type of highway and that type of traffic. And we have to do something to be able to maintain the infrastructure of those highways. To do that, the only way that I can see fit to be able to do that is to move away from the New Orleans branch of DOTD, which is in Bridge City, Louisiana, and move it to Houma to take in what I call the Bayou region of infrastructure in DOTD. Terrebonne Parish, Lafourche, St. Mary, and also Assumption Parish. And catching those 4 parishes with our own DOT location, we would be able to acquire more money and better money to be able to maintain and sustain our infrastructure. We need new highways built along with certainly maintaining what we already have. The second item that I would think would be probably I-49 corridor. It's been sitting for years now between the state and the federal government, who's responsible for what and who's going to move forward with what, and it's not moving forward. We definitely need to move that forward from New Orleans area all the way through to Shreveport, Louisiana. That will serve as not only an economic growth highway, but also an evacuation route. It's been 3 or 4 years now that we have been blessed, I guess, with the fact that we haven't been hit by a hard hurricane. Earlier this year, Barry came and threatened us. That was not a hurricane, ladies and gentlemen. They called it a hurricane. That's ordinarily that was just a little weather that passed through, and still it brought 9 feet of water up against our levees. That's going to continue to grow and get worse as things happen. Last is to go to Baton Rouge and form a coalition of regional business and public officials to be able to work on flood protection, both coastal and riverine, and working closely with local officials to take the lead with the LA1 project to maintain Port Fourchon as a viable port in the state of Louisiana and in the United States. Thank you, sir.
The next question for the candidates, and this will be directed to Mr. Voisin first. What areas of improving and expansion economic development would you promote, and what specific legislation would you introduce to improve the economic development of our region?
Economic development, one of the reasons why we've maybe lagged is the fact that we've been so spoiled by the oil field in the past. We've always made a good living. People were able to get out of high school rather than get education, get out of high school and go out and make a good living, buy a nice little house up the street or in a cute little subdivision and make a good living. We're learning now that that is not the pro quo anymore. It's not the way it is anymore. Oil field will probably bounce back. In fact, it is bouncing back right now. And with the help of Fourchon right down the road from us in Morgan City and the Houma Navigation Canal, I think that we can grow that economy back to near where it was. But what we have to do for economic development is we have to think a little bit more out of the box. We are becoming a hub for medical treatment. People, I mean, when I travel a little bit, when my wife and I do a little traveling, we have people that talk to us about CIS and some of the other medical firms and things in this area. Thibodeau General, Terrebonne General, Chabert Medical, all of these things, Ochsner especially, all of these things are things that if we train our young people to go into health, and one of the things we're missing more than anything right now is properly trained and fully trained nurses, both RN and PNs. We need to get this done and move on with health. Education, we need to get more people into education, not only learning, but to be able to teach. We need to get people through Fletcher, through Nichols, and other avenues and revenues to be able to have these kids trained, to be able to learn how to become qualified, bona fide, certified teachers. And with that, we can move on. But education is the key to all of it. Some people think it's all big business. Big business cannot move on without education. Education will not move on unless we get the help of business to be able to supplement and put back in what they will get out in the future. But that's a marriage that we have to create, is between education and business. Thank you.
Ms. Amade, would you like me to repeat the question? What areas of improving and expanding economic development would you promote, and what specific legislation would you introduce to improve the economic development of our region?
I'd like to take steps to promote business and industry that's already here and business and industry that wants to locate here that will bring good-paying jobs to our people. It seems that there are a lot of opportunities for businesses to come here that will offer starting jobs, and we have plenty of those. It would be better if we could encourage businesses that are going to have positions that will help people to have an income where they can truly sustain their families. They can pay for their medical care, they can build houses, they can start their own businesses eventually. So that's what I'd like to encourage. I believe what's holding us back right now, I see two major obstacles right now. One of them is our infrastructure. As we've talked about here already this evening, roads and bridges, highways. If we can't be sure to get products to the consumers, then businesses are not going to bother. So we must improve our roadways. We have to have infrastructure here that can support whatever types of industries we want to flourish here. And the other would be lawsuits. Lawsuits are really an obstacle here. We have tried for a couple of years now to pass some tort reform measures, and we really have not been able to make much progress yet. I'm hopeful that in the coming year, we'll be able to move things forward. So some of the legislation that I'd be happy to propose, unless somebody's already doing it, then I'll co-author with them, would be, first of all, a bill like Representative Wright tried to pass this last session. It was a bill that moves DOTD operations funding out from the Transportation Trust Fund. I think it was a year ago that the voters at the polls approved that we would not pay state police payroll out of the Transportation Trust Fund. Well, now we need to move DOTD operations out of there too, so that Transportation Trust Fund money actually goes to construction of infrastructure projects. And I began to bring a bill this year that was related to tort reform, and it didn't get very far because the attorneys' associations were not happy because my bill was going to deal with certain advertising practices. So what we were able to do this year is to pass a resolution to have the State Supreme Court and the Bar Association come back to us with some recommendations on improving attorney advertising so that maybe we can begin to take Louisiana off of the list where we're at the top in lawsuits for damages.
Thank you. And this next question is for you, Ms. Amade. What is your most pressing plans and priorities for statewide legislation and for local legislation?
Most pressing
What are your
plans
most
and priorities?
pressing plans and priorities for statewide legislation and our local legislation?
Well, besides these budget issues and infrastructure issues that we've already been talking about, I think that next in line would be more along the consumer protection avenue that I have begun working on. Well, I've worked on it for 4 years now in little ways. I believe that we need to be able to allow parents to make the decisions concerning their children more and government less. I think that God gave children to parents, not governments, and therefore I'd like to be sure that the laws that we pass actually follow what our state child code says in the preamble, where it speaks about how parents are supposed to be the ones responsible for their children, supposed to be making these decisions for the upcoming well-being and education of their children. So I'd certainly like to see more of that. We've already passed some measures that protect especially our seniors and those with disabilities from unscrupulous businesses who want to try to entice them through email and phone calls. The federal government already takes care of physical mail. We may need to see more of that. I want to see as that comes into law if that's really helping or if we need to beef that up some more. So getting the government out of our personal business and protecting the consumers from unscrupulous business practices would be high up there, right after the budget and infrastructure.
Thank you. Mr. Varzan, would you like me to repeat the question? Sure. What are your most pressing plans and priorities for statewide legislation and for local legislation?
statewide legislation, I think one of the key issues statewide right now is certainly tax reform. We need, I don't know if we need to revisit the tax system and reconsider maybe parts of what was called the Stelly Plan, something that was brought up in the legislature probably 7, 8, 10 years ago. But that was a plan that would have done more with less money. The other thing that we need to do as far as legislation is to put more stop gaps in place to be able to stop fraud and waste in government. And just in health benefits alone, it's pointed out to me by some people, some legislators, that it's as much as $1 billion of possible fraud that goes on with Medicaid, Medicare, and that's a lot of money. I'm not saying take that $1 billion away from health care. I'm saying take it away from the people that are getting it or using it fraudulently and putting it in the hands of people who are needy and have to have that. And it's going to take a special kind of person to go and find those things out and pass the legislation to get it done. It's not going to be an easy task, but it's a task that I do plan and will look into and grab by the horns. The other thing is to protect our elderly. As we get older in life, we have less and less income. When we were younger people, and when I say we, all of us one day will get to where maybe I am. Hopefully, what happens is that you pay into into the Social Security system. Then the federal government takes that money away from you and they use it for something else and they spend it somewhere else and they say, hey, Social Security is going to fail soon. Well, what's happening is more people are getting older, and you can't keep feeding that beast with the same amount of corn. You have to have more corn, and to get more corn, you're going to have to put more into the system, and that's just the way of the beast. Yes, sir. Thank you.
This next question will be directed first to Mr. Voisin. What importance do you place on the establishment of a Department of Transportation and Development regional office in the Bayou region as it relates to the completion of the I-49 interstate corridor project in our area?
I place a lot in us getting our own regional, Bayou region, is what I'd like to refer to it as, DOT office, and getting the I-49 done. With that in place, we will be able to have equipment on hand. We're sharing equipment right now with the greater New Orleans area, and I don't have to tell you where when these crews go to work in the morning and they say, hey, we got 5 trucks that are ready to go to work, and you got 4 of them going to New Orleans or going across the lake somewhere else, and you got 1 truck maybe coming to the southeast over here, actually southwest of New Orleans, but southeast Louisiana. You got 1 truck coming here and 4 going somewhere else. You're not getting your fair share. To get our fair share in the region, we will have to get our own division, and that is what we plan to do. We have a substation already in place on Van Avenue in Houma that has been here for 100 years, I think, and it is utilized, but not at all properly utilized because of manpower and because of equipment. And we're not going to get the manpower and equipment that we need until somebody goes up there and gets it. And that's what we have to do, is we have to go up there and we have to go get it. I-49 corridor, to be able to get that completed, we would have to use DOTD here, we would have to use DOTD out of Lafayette and the New Orleans area to be able to complete from the Booty area all the way to Shreveport. But if we get this section at least done up to Lafayette and through Lafayette, we can at least at that point splurge people away in the event of a major catastrophe and we have to evacuate. Right now, we have people want to go west on 90, go east on this one, and go every other direction, and it's just a cluster of nobody moving. What we need to do is we need to get this done to whereas even I-49, once we get it done, to be able to close it off and head all 4 lanes or 6 lanes headed north to get people out of here in the event of a catastrophe. That's the only way that's the survival of our people here. Other than that, I mean, just coming here just now, I was 10 minutes late because of the traffic right here on 311. I didn't plan on 5:30 being that busy. But it was. Can you imagine for a hurricane? Can you imagine for a hurricane? You'd be waiting for me now. Thank you.
Ms. Amade, the question to you, would you like it repeated?
That's okay. I believe that's a high priority. I don't know that this area has really had the representation with DOTD that we need when we have to be divided among several districts. It would be great if we could unify that and have one district that covers our whole region right here. I believe we could get a lot more done, so that is a high priority.
The next question for the candidates will be directed to Ms. Amade first. There have been spirited arguments made on both sides of the Industrial Tax Exemption Program, or ITEP. Basically, tax incentives to attract new businesses and jobs versus a reduction of tax revenues for a particular region. What is your specific position on the Industrial Tax Exemption Program, and do you favor any change in the way the ITEP tax incentives are determined by local governments, such as parish governing bodies, municipal governing bodies, and school boards and sheriffs?
Thank you. Whenever I was serving on the parish council, I noticed that certain tax incentive programs for businesses like this did not always take into consideration some of the local obligations. I felt that it's not fair for the state to be able to come into a given parish and give away parish tax money to a business just to get the business to come without the parish having some say-so. So I do want the local governments to have say-so in any ITEP proposition. I don't like the way that it has been working under an executive order because it seems kind of bumpy. It seems that in some cases, one entity, one portion of the local government represented in making the decision has the authority to say no, and then the whole deal is off. I would like to see a more balanced approach where everyone has input and then the decision can be made by the whole. But the reason that we must have local input on this, if we're going to do it at all, is because when one of the companies that was coming in when I was on the parish council was about to build a really large warehouse and store certain equipment in there or certain merchandise in there that would have to be treated very specially if the building happened to catch fire. And if the local fire district was not going to be receiving the tax revenue, then where are they supposed to buy this specialized equipment in order to fight a fire at that warehouse? So that was a real-life issue, and that's what clued me in that there was a problem with the way things were working. So I am only in favor of ITEP-type incentives when there is a balance of local government input with any other entities that are involved, and when there's a return on investment that is proven. In other words, if a business comes in under one of these agreements and does not produce the list of their responsibilities, whether that is X number of jobs or a certain level of pay for those jobs or whatever, when they are not meeting their end of the bargain, I believe the bargain needs to be over. They at least need to come to the table and renegotiate. That has not always been done in the past. So if we can get it right, I'm fine with continuing ITEP. If we can't get it right, then I might just have to fight against it.
Mr. Voisin, would you like me to repeat the question?
Understand it. I'm also torn between the yes and no on industrial tax incentives, and the reason why is because it's never been properly monitored. I think that if properly monitored, that it could be a win-win situation for both industry and local and state government. But not being properly monitored or monitored 6 months or annually at least, what happens is people will go 2 or 3 years and they say, well, we're going to build the rest of the jobs in 6 months. We're waiting on this other piece of equipment. And all the while, you're on tax incentives and other companies are struggling to keep up with you who are paying taxes, people who have been here forever. On those bases, I'm opposed to it, but if properly monitored, it could be a good thing. It could be a win-win situation. My understanding in the last 20 years, I guess, that it's been around is that it's created some jobs in the parish here and in the region and some fair pay, but not all of the jobs and certainly not the amount of pay that was promised at the time or at the inception of contract between government and industry. I'm torn between it, and once again, because of the monitoring of it. If properly monitored, it could work, but probably not.
Thank you. Mr. Voisin, this question is for you. Do you support a constitutional convention to change the nature of the governor's power or the current tax structure of the state? If so, what do you believe are the most important issues to address in such a constitutional convention, and how will you work to support a constitutional convention?
I am in favor of a constitutional convention. What's being presented right now and what's being worked right now, I think is so broad and maybe even outdated. It certainly needs to be streamlined for it to work and to be fully operational. I think that it would need to be streamlined. The tax structure is not where it should be, I don't think. And I am in favor of the constitutional convention if modified some. Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Amadi, would you like me to repeat?
No, thank you. When I first came in 2016, I had a bill drafted to introduce a limited constitutional convention. The only reason I didn't run it was because those people who were experts in this informed me that you couldn't do a limited constitutional convention. You either had a full convention or no convention at all. After the deadline passed for me to file that bill, I found out they were wrong. So I didn't get to file it after. I am in favor of a limited constitutional convention, and I've already co-authored a couple of bills to that matter in these past few years. The reason I say limited is because I believe what we need most is a constitutional convention that focuses on the budget, the spending, the taxing, revenue, expenses. We need to focus on that. We need to deal with the 400 or so statutorily dedicated funds, plus the constitutionally dedicated ones. As we've tried to remove some that maybe are outdated or we feel were not as high on a priority list as they might have been when they were initially passed, what we found is every dedicated fund has what they call a constituency. There is no fund that we could simply remove that we're not going to find some objection. And so when we would introduce bills to remove some of these funds, in the debate, most people were saying, oh, sure, remove all the dedicated funds you want, except the one that I like. And so we never could come to a consensus, and we've only removed a few. If we would be able to have a limited constitutional convention where we focus on the parts of the Constitution that deal directly with the budget, we could finally restructure the whole budget and make it more realistic, more applicable to today, make it to where not virtually everything is locked down so that we can have it more flexible, so that as the economy changes up and down, the budget can move with it and not be the big obstacle that it currently seems to be. I would not be in favor of a constitutional convention that opens up the entire Constitution at this point in time, because I fully believe that if we did that, the delegates would spend more than 75% of the allotted time, maybe up to 90% of the allotted time, wrestling with other parts of the Constitution. They might not even get around to the budget portion. So I would rather see it limited to where the budget, the fiscal issues are the only real focus.
This next question, we will start with Ms. Amadei. We are going to show you a map of congressional districts, congressional map. And the question for you all is, with the upcoming census and redistricting, what will you do to secure better representation for our region?
And I'm first? Okay. Those maps. I would like to see some lines drawn that seem to make sense and that are not so complicated. I know that the lines tend to be drawn based on population and demographics, but seriously, some of those lines can be ridiculous. I would like to see if our region could possibly have its own congressional district without us having to share with certain big cities that seem to get much more attention than we do. That way, maybe our very rural district and some of the surrounding rural areas could have our own representation. So that would be my focus.
Mr. Voisin, that question goes to you as well. With the upcoming census and redistricting, what would you do to secure better representation for our region?
What I would do is I had the pleasure of working on the redistricting of Terrebonne Parish for the council. In fact, I was the redistricting chairman for that committee. And everything that you want to do, you're not going to get done. Besides getting what you need or want done in a particular area to maybe keep cultures together or keep country folk together, keep city folk together and things like that. It's not going to happen. The federal government will walk in and change it all for you if it's necessary. Before you make any moves, there's going to be one or two people on a local level who's going to discuss with you and explain to you what you can and can't do, what you might be able to change, and what you certainly can't change. They say it's against the law, federal government law, that you don't gerrymander, but the federal government pretty much tells you that you better gerrymander if you want to get these things done. It's a fighting battle. I look forward to working on this next year, and on the state level, I will try to be on the committee for the legislature that does do that, because I've had some experience locally with that. Like I said, I chaired the committee locally here in Terrebonne Parish 10 years ago, and would certainly like to do it again. Thank you.
The next question to the candidates will go to Mr. Voisin first. Just as is the case on the federal level, state legislators seem to be more entrenched in their party line than in collaborating with each other towards solutions that work for the entire state. What actions will you take to facilitate more effective collaboration?
I think what I would do is, or what I will do is, I am a moderate Republican. I'm considered a good listener and a problem solver. There are lobbyists, whatever you want to call them, with big dollars that want to control several districts of this state, but they will not control District 51. The voice of the people will be heard. And I am able to lead a coalition of Democrats, Republicans, and independents for good government, to overcome our budget crisis and help education, training, small business, and certainly repairing our coast and marshes. We need to work closer with the local area, certainly Terrebonne Parish, for coastal flood protection, to add on to and heighten the Morganza, which this parish myself as a councilman back then, helped to pass a tax to be able to put the Morgans in place the way it sits now. I was the council chairman, in fact, at the time when that passed. I would like for us to be able to also consider, although we worry all the time about coastal flooding from hurricanes and things, now it's gotten to be a secondary problem, the fact of riverine flooding coming from the Atchafalaya River, flooding into Bayou Chene. If it hadn't been for Representative Sam Jones and Senator Brett Allain and Norby Chabert and several other people, we would have been in dire straits in the northern part of this parish just 3 months ago. That soon. That just did that short a period of time. Fortunately, we had a little bit of flooding from that hurricane, that storm, whatever, caused us some problems in Bide the Large and also in Montague. But they were able to withstand the problems on the northern part of the parish because of the protection that was granted by blocking Bayou Chene. And thank goodness for some of those good folks that got up and stood up and went to the governor and got it done. And Lord behold, a lot of people stayed with dry feet, didn't have to put on their white shrimp boots to go hang their clothes on the clothesline.
Amade, would you like me to repeat the question?
I think I got it, sure. In these past 4 years, in spite of being the vice chair of the state Republican Party, it seems that there's a lot more that we have in common. The different senators and representatives in the different parties, whether it's Democrat, Republican, or Independent, there's a lot more that we have in common than those things that divide us. There's a lot more that I agree with the governor on as far as what our problems are and some of the solutions to fix them than there are things that we disagree on. So I have worked across party lines in many instances. I worked with Senator Rick Ward to help Senator Brett Allain to finish the funding for the Bayou Chene barge gate. I've worked with a number of legislators helping co-authoring bills with them on issues that we agree upon. So I think that the best thing we can do to not see partisan divides like we see in Washington is to continue to work together, especially on those things that we agree upon. And what I don't do, haven't done, and won't do is to go and make deals that would not be in the best interest of my constituents. My votes are not for sale. I don't give up a vote and give you one so that you'll give me one later. Every vote, every bill that comes before us, I believe we have to weigh and measure those bills on their merit. And we have to make those decisions based on whether it's good for our constituents, whether it's good for the state. It doesn't matter whether the person who authored the bill has a D or an R or an I behind their name. I vote based on the merits of the bills. And there are many in the House that I work with who do the same, and that number is growing. So I expect that we will see even greater progress in the coming term than we have in this past term.
Thank you. This next question is for you, Ms. Amade. In response to complaints of government waste, where would you propose cutting expenditures in the state budget?
We get asked that question a lot. In fact, sitting on appropriations, we're often challenged with that very question, especially from our governor when he comes before us to present his budget. He always says, well, if you don't like it, where are you going to cut? If you're not going to increase revenue to fund it, where are you going to cut? That's like telling a person who's overweight, which body part do you want me to cut off? It's not that simple. It's not just a matter of saying, hey, let's just defund this agency or this office or this department or this program. If it was, it would already be done. Instead, what we have to do is work more on combating fraud, waste, and abuse, not just with programs or systems, but with whole agencies. The service delivery method that we follow in many agencies, especially one as huge as the Department of Health, needs to be modernized and restructured so that it works more efficiently. If you really want to know where some of the waste is, the best people to talk to are people in the middle, not top management and not the bottom-level, entry-level workers, but those people who have worked in the departments and agencies for years. They know where waste is. The problem is the way the agencies are structured, very often, they're the last person who's going to dare speak up, because whistleblower-type laws may not protect them, and they need their jobs. But they talk to us. Sitting on appropriations, I work very closely with a handful of House members who are determined, if the heads of departments and agencies are not going to voluntarily tell us where there's waste, then we'll go find it. And that's what we've been doing, and that's what we've been uncovering. And so we've actually been able to make some progress and pass some legislation even with some of the items we found. We found that some departments and agencies operate with something called an off-budget account. Wouldn't you like that in your household budget or your business? We found that some departments and agencies that offer certain programs were not necessarily making sure that those people who participate in those programs are actually eligible. We've been able to make great strides in solving that. We have a long way to go, though. There's still plenty of areas that we need to clean up within departments and agencies, within what is funded and what could be funded with a lot less bureaucracy, so that we're really getting the services and the items that we're supposed to be paying for with our tax dollars, and not just letting it go out holes in the bucket.
Thank you, Ms. Amadi. Mr. Voisin, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, ma'am, I think I understand it.
Sure.
Thank you. Cut expenditures, I think you need to start with government waste. Fraud and waste is where it all begins, or actually it all ends. That's where your money goes, a lot of money. I mentioned earlier, probably I'm told in excess of $1 billion of waste in health care, of the approximate $11 billion that are spent. $1 billion of it is probably misdirected, and those are the things that we need to stop. The big question is, how much does it cost to monitor the fraud and the waste? But you have to stop it. You have to stop it somewhere. And when you stop it, you don't just stop it and say, well, we're going to take it away and we're going to spend that somewhere else. But health care is necessary to young kids and to old people. I think our elderly and our kids that are in need. We have to take care of those people. You and I can take care of ourselves. We get the whooping cough, or we get a bad headache, or we come down with the measles, or whatever it is. We're going to survive. You and I can survive. But those babies and some of those old people won't survive unless we help them. And that's why those dollars need to go. And when you talk about $1 billion that could be helping those needy people, and it's going in the wrong pockets, it's going in the wrong hands, you got to try and stop that and redirect it. The other thing I would think would be monitoring all departments in government from top to bottom. They need to be monitored. And if a department is found to have 2 or 3 people that are wasteful or duplicating jobs or something like that, not only slap them on the hand, but whoever in the heck is their boss, slap them on the hand. Whoever in the heck is in charge of that department, because he's allowed it to go on. It's not just the employees that can spend 6 or 8 hours a day in the coffee room. Besides that, I mean, the boss has got to know that the work isn't getting done, and that we got to stop it. So don't just bring those people at a task. Bring the department heads to task too, and make sure that they're fined or billed or whatever, to make sure that it doesn't reappear and it stops. And when you do that, you will find that the money will be in the right hands and go to the right people at that time. That's one of the things that I would like to try and
Mr.
get
Wozniak, your
implemented in
3
my
minutes
first
is
4
up.
years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This next question will first go to Mr. Voisin. What, if any, tax reforms do you support at the state level?
I think sales tax are in order and competitive with other states. I think if we could only stop some of the fraud and stop some of the duplication of duties in government, those are the things where you could save enough money to make sure that you have a stable tax base and also allowing you economic growth. I think stable tax bases and the economy coming back, especially the oil field expansion, personal income tax and business taxes should be fair and equitable, and I think probably they are. Tax incentives on industry is something that's still in limbo in my mind, and something that I need to study more, and I think everybody needs to study more as to the benefits and or the downfalls. Thank you, sir.
Ms. Amade, do you need me to repeat the question?
Thank you. I believe that we need a lot of tax reform. Some of the bigger ideas would be things that I could support, such as having a flat tax for income tax. One of the plans that I've been looking at, and I may just bring the bill myself, is if we would lower the current 2% tax bracket to 0, which would effectively eliminate it, and then reduce the 6% tax bracket to 4%, then that would remove thousands of Louisiana residents from tax liability by exempting the first $17,000 of income and a family's first $34,000 of income from state income tax. Above those levels, all the rest of the filers would pay a 4% fee, a 4% rate, and it would be simpler and easier, and it would be a pro-growth way to reform the revenue code. As far as business, I would like to see the franchise tax repealed. I would like to see the day when we can repeal both the inventory tax and the inventory tax credit. The main obstacle to doing that is that we have a lot of parish governments right now that are really supported specifically by inventory tax. So unless or until they're able to redo their budgets, their tax structure, we would end up doing harm to some of the local governments. So I've been encouraging the local governments for a couple of years now to work towards that, to come to me with a 10-year plan or something to show me how can you make your parish budget not dependent upon the inventory tax. Because I see that this is probably going to go away in the future. Even if I'm not the one that does it, we're headed that way. So some of the parishes have already begun to look for other options and restructure the way they've done their budgets. I believe we need to reform corporate tax, and there are a lot of other smaller things that I wouldn't have time to explain in 3 minutes. But yes, I would like to see a complete overhaul of our whole tax structure in Louisiana, so that we're not chasing away businesses, and so that we're not putting ourselves at a disadvantage with our competing neighboring states, and so that our families can keep more of their money to pay for the things that they need.
Thank you. The next question for the candidates will be directed first to Ms. Amade. In what areas would you look to diversify the economy of Louisiana, especially considering the downturn of the oil and gas industry? And specifically, what legislation would you propose to diversify Louisiana's economy?
Well, I think the best legislation I could propose to diversify the economy would be to deal with some of what we've spoken of earlier, like the tort reform laws. because there are companies, there are industries who want to come here, and they're just staying away right now because of our climate. But as far as what industries to diversify to, in the last few years, we've taken a few steps, maybe not with the focus on specifically diversifying, but the result will be diversifying. One thing that we passed this year was a law that lets our state law concerning industrial hemp line up with the federal law. So that's going to allow Louisiana farmers to grow industrial hemp, and so they're not going to be at a disadvantage in competing with other farmers. And it's my hope that industrial hemp, as you probably already know, is not a form of marijuana that people can get high off of. Industrial hemp is a plant that, before we had all this plastic around us, virtually everything was made out of hemp, not plastic. I can remember my dad had a canvas stool when I was a really little girl, and that's what it was made of. So it's my hope that as we have now allowed industrial hemp to be grown here, that it will also attract manufacturing companies so that we can also take that product and turn it into things that consumers need. Right here in Louisiana, with good paying jobs, especially right here in our district, we welcome them. So I would like to see a continued diversification, as we see in our region already, into medical. That's doing well. I would like to see other industries where there are medium and high-paying jobs, and we already know some of those, like technology. There's no reason why we can't expand technology fields right here. I would like to see more of those businesses relocate or locate here, but more than that, I'd like to encourage entrepreneurship, because I believe our people here are very creative, and as we allow the free market to dictate and take regulations and laws and lawsuits off of people's backs, we will see an organic diversification happen, because we're creative and we've always been that way. We just have to not necessarily incentivize it by giving tax dollars for it, but allow it to let it flourish.
Wazan, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think I understand. Ways to, besides the oil field and with the oil field going, I strongly believe in talking to people every day for the last 3 months, I guess, 2 months now, I'm sorry, since I started this candidacy, that the oil field is coming back. It looks very good. But more than that, I think even if it did come back, there are other areas that we need to move into. One of them, I think, is tourism. I think that Southeast Louisiana is overlooked. When we talk about tourism in Louisiana, most of the people look towards New Orleans and Bourbon Street and the riverfront and all of that other stuff, and that's all great. But we have a couple of several guys around here who just doing a bang-up job with swamp tours and things like that, and people from New Orleans are coming here by the busloads occasionally to do that, and we need to push that. I think Billy Nungesser's done a fantastic job of helping us with that. Seafood, another industry that I think we need to push, that has been just about depleted. Our shrimping industry is just about gone. On Grand Caillou, where I live, at one time there was 12 shrimp factories. They're down to 3 right now, and all 3 of those are struggling. They're struggling. The other thing that I think that Louisiana could, Southeast Louisiana could do, is imports and exports. We have a couple of things that sometimes we look at them as curses, such as the H&C and the Atchafalaya River. When the Atchafalaya River storms offshore, coming in at the mouth of the Houma Navigation Canal, it's a curse to us. We say, oh my God, because of that canal, because of the river, we're going to flood and drown and everything else. Instead of looking at it as a curse, we should look at it maybe as a blessing, because those 2 canals, if they were deepened a little bit, they are a perfect port. If you look on a map, Merida, Mexico is directly south of the Houma Navigation Canal and the Atchafalaya River, actually, exactly north and south. I mean, you don't have to move the compass. That's how close they are to us. We could move items to that port and from that port with small ships into the Port of Morgan City and the Port of Houma through those outlets and inlets to be able to bring in imports and exports. And we could thrive with that, I promise you. The banana people do great in Biloxi and Gulfport, in Gulfport, Mississippi. And we could do that here. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. This next question, moving right along, is for Mr. Voisin. What is your position on developing greater incentives for film/entertainment industry to come to Louisiana?
Film, entertainment.
Film/entertainment industry.
Film, entertainment.
And then the backslash, yes.
Okay. I wanted to make sure you had read your lines right.
Me too.
I think that it could be good. I don't think it's good right now. I think the way it's been handled for the last 10 years at least has been bad. But I think I really believe that it's a love story instead of a horror movie if you would properly oversee it. If the state had a committee or whatever you call it that sits aboard the board that sits above the film industry board that sits above it in Louisiana, done this right, and the legislators can certainly see that that's done. We can get that done to make sure that it's properly done. Right now, I'm under the impression that there are possibly film credits that are being sold, and that may not be true, but supposedly that's part of the fraud in the film industry in Louisiana, and that's only because of poor accountability and way too much party politics. Way too much party politics. If it's done right, I really believe that it could be something that helps us a lot. We could use it to, we could actually use the film industry to help market Louisiana, create more jobs and provide educated and well-rounded jobs for that industry in Louisiana, and it would showcase Louisiana. It's a way to showcase Louisiana if it's done right. If it's not done right, we have problems. But to showcase the beautiful state of Louisiana would be so great. So many people throughout the country, throughout the world, look at movies that are filmed in Louisiana, the magnolia trees and the big draping oak trees and the mansions and all of the other stuff that we as residents still admire. You can imagine the people that don't see these things throughout the country and throughout the world certainly do admire that. But it could be a dream instead of a nightmare if it was done right. But it would need to be done right, and legislators can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Amity, would you like me to repeat the question?
Oh, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
It seems that the film tax credits that had been available for several years now, the original purpose was to spur more of the film industry coming here, because we figured out that every time there's a really good movie out that was filmed in Louisiana, it brings us tourism. And tourism, for every dollar that the state budget puts into tourism, we get a 40-to-1 match. And that 40 that comes back to us is not coming from the federal government, which is also our tax dollars. It's coming from people who come to visit. They're willingly coming. They're coming on vacation. So it's not under coercion. They're giving the money to come here and enjoy Louisiana. So it seems that the intent was good, but over the years, it seemed that the benefit aside from the tourism, the direct benefit of the tax credits was not staying in Louisiana. And instead, it seemed that it was going to places like California, where the big film industry companies are at home. And so what we've done in these past couple of years is we've attempted to change the film tax credit program so that there is more accountability, more structure to it. We've changed it in ways that should guarantee that the benefit stays here. Maybe not 100%, because we don't mind if people from other states come here to make films, but the bulk of the benefit needs to stay here. If that works out properly, then we're getting a return on our investment. And so while I don't necessarily think it's the best way to do business, I'm not going to be the one to propose the bill to do away with it if we're getting that return on our investment. Because what I've seen is many times films will be shot in very small and rural communities here, and while the film crew is in town, there is a great benefit to the local governments, the cities and the towns and the parishes. And so if we just did away with the tax credit overnight, the industry would react by saying, well, we're just not going to come to Louisiana. And then all of our little towns and communities that were counting on those dollars would have to find a way to replace it. So I wouldn't want to see it taken away instantly. I think there is plenty of potential there. There needs to be transparency. There needs to be accountability and enforcement. And then we need to watch it and be sure that it's working for us. And if it's not, I'll bring the bill to do away with it.
Okay, this next question, we'll start with Ms. Amadei. Currently, some of the credentials that are awarded through the Jumpstart Career Pathway program in our public high schools are not being recognized by industry. What would you do to both reinvigorate and refocus the Jumpstart program in our state?
If the current credentials are not being recognized, I think there's been a breakdown. So we would need to have industry talk to education and be sure that the courses that are being offered and the credentials that are the result are actually what industry needs. If we're going to take people's time and educate them into credentials that are going to be worthless when they walk out the door, then we've wasted their time. If we're going to use taxpayer dollars to pay for that education that they're getting, we're not getting a return on our investment because we're sending someone out the door who may not be qualified for the job that we've been paying to train them for. So I believe the first step is going to be to keep that communication open, keep it very fluid. I believe that especially right now in this day and time, education can be very flexible and move quickly. I don't think that the changes have to take years. I don't think we need to keep credentialing people for 3 or 4 years into a field where there's no work. That's pointless.
Mr. Voisin, that question goes to you as well. Would you like me to repeat it?
Please do.
Certainly. So currently, some of the credentials awarded through our Jumpstart Career Pathway program in our public high schools are not being recognized by industry. What would you do to both reinvigorate and refocus the Jumpstart program?
To reinvigorate it and re-jumpstart the program, I think we'd need to get with business and find out exactly what their needs are to be able to train these kids, these young people, to be able to do that. Unless you do that, it's needless. It's senseless. Business should know exactly what they need, and our educators should be brought to knowledge as to exactly what's necessary to train them for that particular field.
Candidates, this will be the last question of the evening before closing comments. This will be directed to Mr. Voisin first. List 3 qualities or qualifications that sets you apart from your opponent in this race.
I've been a small businessman most of my life, having to make payroll, pay employees, purchase equipment, buy and sell inventory, and succeed with little capital. That teaches you how and when and where to best spend your dollars. It's a great teacher. To be able to spend taxpayers' dollars, I think, before anyone goes to the legislature, they should have that training. They should have had quality training with other employees and people, and had to pay bills, had to pay taxes, had to do those things to make them qualified, I think, to be able to go and spend taxpayer dollars. Just one of my beliefs. Secondly, I think I'm a problem solver. In going to Baton Rouge, I think one of the things I'm going to have to do is mend the fabric of good government that has been torn apart probably in the last 3 or 4 years by some obstructionists that have failed to work maybe properly with the rest of the legislature, maybe with the rest of the Senate, and certainly with the current administration. Thirdly, honesty, fairness, and ability to unite and lead. And I will never sell out to big business and lobbyists at the expense of our great people of District 51. They will entrust me, I think, with their vote specifically to represent them. The word is very plain. It's representative, state representative. And I'm not going up there to represent any form of lobbyist or any form of my beliefs in my head that are preset right now. I do have opinions, but in the past I have voted against my own opinions to do what's right for my constituency, what they need and what they want. I will have an open door policy where you can call me anytime, day or night, on my cell phone or at my home, and I will work on your problems to get them done. Thank you.
Samadi?
I'll say that probably the first and most primary characteristic that I have that sets me apart is my foundational core beliefs. They're solid, and I don't budge off of them. I firmly believe in faith, in family, in freedom, and those are primary and foundational. I think that the second would be my life experiences, the things that I've been through, the things that I've learned, the jobs that I've had, the business experience, the experience in dealing with legislators on bills that they were trying to pass or bills that they were trying to kill, both at the federal level and even at the state level before I ever got into any position of political office. Those are things that are with me. Those are my experiences, and those are the things that trained me and brought me to this point with the skills that I have to be able to effectively get things done. Third, I believe it's just my desire to serve. It's what I do. I didn't decide to run for public office because I needed a job or a title. It wasn't something that was ever on my radar. When I was a little girl, I never said, hey, one day I'd like to be a politician. In fact, I was at least 2 years into my council term before I didn't cringe when somebody called me a politician, because I don't see it as a politician. I see it as public service. That's what I'm there for. I'm elected to represent the people, and I do that with the tenacity of a bulldog that I learned through my life experiences, through raising my children, through standing and defending whatever was being attacked in those basic foundational beliefs. I believe in family. I believe that parents should raise children. I believe that taxpayers work really hard for their money, and that money is sacred because it's been earned by the sweat of someone's brow. And so every bill that I vote on, those are the things that I consider before I cast my vote.
Thank you, candidates. As Mr. Urosh said, that was our final question that had been submitted to the chamber. I'd like to take the opportunity to provide each of you 3 minutes for closing comments. We'll go in the same order as we have been going. Mr. Clayton Voisin, Would you please go ahead and take your 3 minutes for your closing comments to discuss anything you'd like to wish to discuss?
Yes, sir, thank you. I am a lifelong resident of Terrebonne Parish. I'm a Down-to-Buy boy. I'm from Down-to-Buy. I have acquired all the skills and experience to represent you, and I am ready, willing, and able to do just that in District 51. My love for our region is in my soul, and I can feel all my constituents in my heart. No lobbyists own me. I will not be anybody's all-star when I go to Baton Rouge, but I will be your MVP. I will be your most valuable public servant. If you elect me, Clayton Voisin, number 85, on October 12th, you and I can make a difference. It starts with you, and it will end with me. But I promise you, we can and will win this, and once we do that, you will see some changes in Baton Rouge that people talk about for a long, long time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Voisin. Ms. Barrow-Amade, 3 minutes to you, please.
I have enjoyed being state representative for these past 4 years, and I so look forward to continuing it. There have been many proud moments where I've helped people solve some problems that they had been having for a long time, things that affect their everyday lives, where they've gotten pushed aside or forgotten by some government entity or agency. Moments where my name was in headlines, not because my name was in headlines, I don't need that, but the headlines said things that showed the work that I was doing. Like when I was listed in the Advocate as a member of the Gang of No, because I kept voting no, and people started asking if maybe the green button on my desk was broken. Times like when the governor called me an obstructionist. Those are happy moments for me, because those didn't come because I'm difficult to work with, or I'm just obstinate, or if I'm trying to prove a point or make a name for myself. Those kinds of labels and accusations came because I was serving my constituents by making votes that I felt were the right thing to do. Because as I said, tax dollars are sacred because somebody earned those by the sweat of their brow and by their sacrifice. And it's up to us as legislators who are in charge of the budget to be sure that the money that comes into the state is spent appropriately, not wasted frivolously. So whenever I was voting no a whole lot in 2016 when we first came in with a $2 billion shortfall to solve, what I was saying was, let's not solve it by pulling more money out of the taxpayers' pockets. The budget has grown by over $6 billion in these past 4 years. I'm not pleased with that. $6 billion. But what I am pleased to sit here tonight and say is, if I hadn't been there, if legislators like me hadn't been there, pressing that red button and being accused of being obstructionist, who knows what the budget would be like this year? It might have grown by $9 billion, maybe $16 billion, who knows? Because there was always an ask, and the ask was always much greater than what our economy, than what our people, what our taxpayers could support. So my job, especially on the Appropriations Committee, was to watch out for all that spending and to put some reins on it and to pull back. So those are the kinds of things I spent a lot of time doing in Baton Rouge, working on the budget. And those are the things I'm happy to continue doing, not only working on the budget, but whatever other committees I'm assigned to next. It's been education and labor besides appropriation, and I would enjoy staying on those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank the candidates for participating in the forum tonight. Panelists, thank you for volunteering your time. Thank the Chamber staff and the Board of Directors for their participation in the forum. Special thanks to Dr. Christine Strickland and her staff for allowing us to use the beautiful facility and setup. The Home of Terrebonne Chamber of Commerce would like to thank everyone for attending the forum. Have a good night and be careful on your way to your next destination. Thank you.